La 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 la. Na 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 na. La 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 la. Na na na. La la la.
It all started with this big confusion when I traveled to Belarus for the first time. It was in December 2017. Me and two friends were going by car, and I got this wicked feeling when we got to the border, entering the last dictatorship of Europe. What was it going to be like? I kind of expected something of a post-Soviet apocalypse. The smell of burning sulfur, crazy babushkas slamming vodka for breakfast, children in second-hand Adidas sweatpants chasing radioactive chicken with a Kalashnikov, that crazy kind of shit. But then we got there and it was kind of nice. That's when I first felt infected. I guess my first real symptoms when people around me, like colleagues, friends, and my wife could notice that something was different, that's when my wardrobe started changing. Bell attire. And then, all of a sudden, I was having these melodies inside of my head, and it was like they were taking control of me. Come on, take a seat. I want to tell you about it and show you.
Hast du dich je gefragt und gar schon einmal mitgekriegt, wo auf dem Kontinent Europa wohl die Mitte liegt? Es ist nicht Brüssel, Rom und Petersburg am Neverfluss, nicht Frankfurt, Budapest, Paris, nein, es ist Belarus. Belarus, 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 in der Mitte von Europa liegt Belarus. Belarus, Belarus, dein neues Lieblingsland heißt Belarus.
So you went to the capital of the last dictatorship of Europe and just danced around in public for a political video? That's sick.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
And wearing all those traditional shirts and stuff? Isn't this cultural appropriation? A bit insensitive given your country's colonial history.
How do you know which country I'm from?
Well, you just sang in German, and well.
Well, it's not like Belarus ever was a colony of Germany.
Well, but you guys tried a few times.
Well, we did occupy Belarus a few times, like that one time towards the end of the First World War. But at that point, we already had a prior agreement with the Soviets. And come on, that was the only time that we actually did try to instigate a color revolution abroad. So we kind of had to help those guys. So we basically sold them Belarus for a little train full of gold.
Sounds like a very German thing to do.
Ordnung muss sein.
Well, would you like something to drink?
Don't you think it's weird, though? These Belarusians, when I, as you say, culturally appropriate them, they seem to kind of like it. And I like it too. I mean, I like them crazy much. Actually seems to be one more of those symptoms. Alba-Ruthenia populophilia.
Albaruna? What?
Alba-Ruthenia populophilia. That is science language, and it means liking Belarusians. And, I really adore them. Funny enough, that even started from that same trip that I told you about, from my first encounter with the border guards. At first I was so terrified when this big, grumpy Schwarzenegger lookalike officer in his scarecrow post-Soviet uniform with this one-way ticket to Siberia look walks up to me and asks for my passport. And I got so sweaty and my hand was shaking that I dropped it. And I said, shit, this is gonna be it. He's gonna bust my fucking face open. But then this guy, he bends down, picks it up for me and says, "You are welcome, sir." Geez, that was so pleasant. I was welcome. And ever since I met so many wonderful Belarusians. Of course, some are total jerks, but most of them are just so kind, so nice, so forthcoming, hospitable, punctual. It's even a bit embarrassing for me as a German because they remind me of what I probably should be like myself.
Чуешь коммунальные пахи, житье тебе возьме в петлю. Зразумеешь, что ты, что три черепахи по-ранейшему тягнуть землю. Коли выйдешь в город, ты залезешь в горы и с людьми усталюешь контакт. Зразумеешь, что ты, что і сьогодні, і вчора наше місце на трохи так. Эй, ла-ла-ла-лай, ты не чакай, сюрпризов не будет. Эй, ла-ла-ла-лай, ты не чакай, ты не чакай. Не было Галилея и Боба Марлея, не было Сальвадора Дали. Ни Ленина, ни Леннона, ни Карла Линнея, киты и черепахи были. Эй, ла-ла-ла-лай, ты не чакай, сюрпризов не будет. Эй, ла-ла-ла-лай, ты не чакай, ты не чакай.
Hey,
Hey, nice to see you again.
good to see you again.
Yeah,
Terribly sorry, guys, for keeping you waiting. My internet doesn't work, and so Google Maps was offline. I got a bit lost, but well, only 4 minutes.
Oh yeah, 4 minutes and 1 hour.
What? I thought we said we'd meet at 11. Fuck, different time zone. I forgot to change my watch. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting, and thank you for your patience.
Don't worry. So we wanted to discuss visit from Bundestag related to IT solutions to be practical for Germany.
Richtig, yes.
And did you see our agenda I sent you?
Yes, I saw the agenda and it was pretty good. Let me see, I have it right here somewhere. Just 1 second. There was here. Where is it? Just
Here,
a
we have a
second.
copy printed for you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's probably easier. So, let's see. Thank you all for your ideas and contributions. As I said, the members of the German Bundestag really like pretty much all of it. So we have digital bureaucracy, great. Public services in the digital age, digital ID. What else?
Tools for digital voting?
Digital voting in Belarus. That sounds a bit funny, but well, let's take a look. Then what else do we have?
Distance learning tools.
Distance learning tools. I was wondering what exactly is that supposed to be? Is that like homeschooling? I don't think we're ever going to use that in Germany, but not like we're going to shut down the schools. But thank you. And
How
what
about e-health smart devices?
e-health smart devices? Yes, I like that a lot. So why don't we just go through the whole agenda again in detail, point by point. That was productive. Thank you so much. So you're going to introduce all the changes into the agenda and then send me an updated version, right?
And this time by fix.
Maybe actually, like just to be on the safe side, would not be the worst idea. See, there's a number at the bottom. Okay, but I'm going to discuss the things with the Bundestag then, and I think we should meet one more time to just discuss the final version. What would be a good time for you to meet up again? When that would be?
We will send you some options as a calendar invite.
Calendar what?
Okay, we will send you an email.
Okay, thank you.
So well, time for lunch break. Are you hungry?
Actually, yes. I went jogging this morning. I wanted to see a bit of the city, and then I didn't have time for breakfast. But I think I'm not going to manage because I have my next meeting in 30 minutes.
It's fine, we can order something.
But I don't think we're going to have time for this either.
Where is your next meeting?
Let me check. It's supposed to be not too far from here. Kastratitskaya?
Kostrishnicskaya.
Yeah.
Do you know how to get there?
Well, I think if I'm...
Maybe you just use the application Maps.me, It's the best offline map in the world, made in Belarus.
Oh, okay, I think I'll have to check it out. You know what's funny? When I went jogging this morning, it felt like my laptop also went for a little walk in the meantime. I was sure I had left it on the left side on the table in my hotel room, and when I got back, it had, magically moved to the right side. And I wow, really? That was fast. Wow. What is this?
This is Belarus.
You really seem to like them.
I think it's actually worse than that. I think I even see myself in them.
How do you mean?
It even starts from random little things, like the things they eat. Draniki, these potato pancakes? So simple and still so awesome. I'm an absolute dranikaholic. The recipe, how the Belarusians make draniki, that's exactly the same way how my own blessed grandmother used to make kartoffelpuffer for us when we were kids. The smell and the taste of draniki, for me, that's a childhood memory. And you know what's funny?
No.
My grandmother's childhood memories are also connected to Belarus.
How intriguing.
Because her father, my great-grandfather, helped to rebuild Minsk when she was a kid.
Was he a Belarusian construction worker?
Nah, he was a German prisoner of war. He and his comrades were sent to Minsk after the Second World War to rebuild the city.
Which they have probably destroyed a couple of years earlier.
Sometimes the Belarusians even like to joke around that the structures in their capital are so stable because they are of German quality.
Well, I've never been to Minsk, but I've heard it's quite sterile and stale.
The only thing that's really stale, I would say, is the air in here. You should really open the window. But, about Minsk, well, I would say it was quite clean, surprisingly green, beautiful in its own way. But still, when I think back of my trips, the thing that impressed me most were actually the people, their mindset, how liberal, how creative, how independent they were all in their thinking. It was years later when I saw all those, studies and surveys that confirmed the feelings I already had back then.
Numerous studies from Belarusian and international research institutes have shown that in the 2010s, Belarusian society underwent significant transformation. Post-Soviet values like state reverence and paternalism gave way to individual-centric values, with people taking responsibility for their own welfare and future. Belarusian society began to resemble that of neighboring EU countries. This shift was largely driven by the rapid growth of the private sector, which accounted for about 55% of the economy by 2020, allowing Belarusians to experience freedom.
And then 2020 happened. All those peaceful protests for democracy and freedom, against violence and oppression. I felt so much reminded of our own history, the peaceful protests in Germany and Central Europe in 1989.
Yeah, it did look familiar.
And then there's also this whole neutrality thing. Even official Minsk was chasing this dream until pretty recently to be the new Switzerland of Eastern Europe. Get along well with the Russians, but also be friends with the West. The idea that you could square this kind of an iron circle is also a very German fantasy to have.
So you also like the Russians? And again, would you want something to drink?
Well, yes. I have had some Russian-born friends since childhood. We actually grew up together. And I also learned some Russian at the university.
It must have been handy to speak some Russian when you had to travel to Belarus a lot.
Yeah, sure. But, at the beginning, my Ruski was still pretty rusty. And I was actually hoping to get a bit of practice, especially in, reading Cyrillic. So I was just chasing anything that I could decipher, like texts in restaurant menus or public billboards or street signs, just anything that got into my way. And then, when I started reading these texts, I was like wow, how nice is this? They seem to have like a simplified, more logical version of Russian that's actually foreigners friendly.
How do you mean?
You know, in Russian, very often you spell the words totally different from how you would pronounce them. It drives me crazy as I was trying to learn Russian. But there in Belarus, they actually spell the words the way you would speak them. So it's a natural and logical way. But then I realized, wait a minute, this isn't Russian at all. This was what they call the Belaruskaya mova, or the Belarusian language.
Wait. This is like a separate language.
Right? Same thing was for me. It was hard to believe because my Russian friends I told you about, they had explained to me so perfectly well, you know, how Belarusian was just one of those funny fake languages made up to annoy your neighbors, you know, like Ukrainian or Dutch. But then I figured out that
Беларуская мова, як і іншыя славянскія, мае шмат агульных рыс, але ў той жа час валодае унікальнымі асаблівасцямі. Напрыклад, беларуская літара уніскладовая сустракаецца толькі ў нашай мове сярод славянскіх кірылічных алфавітаў. Лексіка ўключае агульнаславянскія словы, але мае таксама запазычанні з іншых моваў, як літвійская, нямецкая і лацінская, што надае ёй адметны характар. Беларуская мова блізкая да ўкраінскай і польскай, аднак мае свае непаўторныя словы, як паляўніча, летуцення і золак. Актыўныя фемінітывы, напрыклад, лекарка ці прафесарка, шырока выкарыстоўваюцца, што таксама робіць яе унікальнай. Беларускі правапіс існуе ў двух варыянтах – наркамаўка і тарашкевіца. Уплыў розных культур зрабіў беларускую мову мовай перасячэннем. І менавіта ў такой разнастайнай культурнай прасторы Беластока Людвік Заменгоф распрацаваў эсперанта, спрабуючы стварыць агульную мову для ўзаемаразумення паміж народамі.
And I need to admit, like, over the years, I've turned into a real mova lover.
And so, of course, you learn to speak it.
Completely. I mean that one complete sentence. Я не размаўляю по-беларуску, але я жадаў бы вывучыць.
That's impressive.
See? But even most Belarusians don't actually speak the language.
Don't they?
It's crazy, right? I mean, they will all tell you how the language is super important and how they love it and it's part of their identity and stuff. And for some, it's really like a religious question. You have to speak it. But still, most people will simply use Russian in the day-to-day.
But they don't feel like Russians, do they?
No. I mean, come on. Would you ever ask a Scotsman or an Irish woman who speak English and only English whether they identify as English?
Not even through a window of a bulletproof car.
See? So when I say that I'm a mova lover, I mean that I just really like the sound of it, listening to people speaking Belarusian. Also because, to me, this is always like, actually, I'm playing bingo. Lingo bingo.
Could you please elaborate?
Sure. You know, the Belarusian language is so full of words from other European languages like Polish or German, but also, you know, like Yiddish or Latin or the Baltic languages. So when I'm listening to someone speaking Belarusians, these many, many random familiar words will just pop up in the conversation.
Ну што, пакарміла ты сёння сваіх вавёрак? Елі яны разынкі ці толькі гарэшкі? Дарэчы, вельмі файная ў цябе сёння сукенка.
Дзякуй. Сёння перакінулася з незнаёмцам. Зноў пыталі адкуль я. І зноў першая асацыяцыя з краінай – гэта дыктатура і Лукашенко. То была вымушана распавесці і пра культуру, і пра гісторыю, і пра сённяшні дзень. Пра кошты, пра мур, пра гвалт, ну і, канешне, пра надзеі.
А я, глядзі, што чытаў. Сёння ў газетах надрукавалі. Зноўку пра яго. Спроба гандлю чалавечымі лёсамі. Колькі можна? Лукашенко, Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко.
Запыталі, што такое Беларусь? Гэта тое, дзе яшчэ жыве Савецкі Саюз? Гэта частка Расіі, тыпу нейкай акругі, дзе дзядуля Лукашенко ўсім упэўнена кіруе. Сёння так, як вам здаецца, дарагія сябры. Беларусь — гэта замкі і кляштары. Гэта шляхці за валізам, он музыка і машэка, а не толькі злосны помслівы дзядуля Лукашенко. Як мяне вы ўсе достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Тех ленивых все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Яны пыталіся, дык што у вас вялікі калгас? Там не вялікі калгас, а вялікае княства. Гэта вялікае княства і магдыбургскае права. Гэта статут старажытнай беларускай дзяржавы. Гэта войны з Масковіяй адна за адной. Гэта агульная дзяржава з Польшай і Літвой. Гэта ганебныя падзелы і прыход саветаў. Гэта нябесная сотня расстраляных паэтаў. Як ленівы ўсе достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Як ленівы ўсе достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Мова, з якою жылі пакаленні. Гэта вогненныя вёскі часоў ваенных. Гэта нудныя савецкія шэрыя гады. Гэта гады камуністы, што вялі да бяды. Гэта пагоня і бел-чырвона-белы сцяг. Гэта нашыя пакутнікі, замкнёныя ў мурах. Гэта прага свабоды і надзея ў зрэнках. Не, Беларусь гэта не Лукашенко. Все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Як на небо все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Як на небо все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Як на небо все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Як на небо все достали простотой своей душевной. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко. Беларусь не Лукашенко, Беларусь не Лукашенко.
Fascinating. I mean, all these facts about Belarus and this man with the mustache, how he managed to stay in power for so long. How many years has he been around?
Over 30 years.
It means how many US presidents?
About 5. You know, this guy has outlived 3 German chancellors, 8 British prime ministers, and at least 15 prime ministers of Italy.
Let me think, when he came to power...
the economy of China was about the size of the Netherlands.
And Vladimir Putin was some clerk in the tourism department in St. Petersburg.
Star Wars was a trilogy.
And Michael Jackson was black.
And the headless body of Kurt Cobain was barely cold.
Gosh, no wonder the guy managed to equalize himself with the country over this 30 years. Anything to drink now?
Yes.
What would you like?
Yeah, right, he is a tough nut. And of course, dictatorship is his brand and so on. But you know, I still refuse to believe that everything is supposed to be lost.
What do you mean?
I think this is actually kind of my next symptom.
Skywalker syndrome.
Skywalker syndrome? You think people should use the Force to overthrow the regime?
Nah, I believe in peaceful transitions.
And then what? Lukashenko is Tikhanovskaya's father?
No, what I mean is I cheer for the Rebel Alliance and their fight against the evil empire and the Dark Lord. But I believe there is still good in him.
In Lukashenko, for real?
Yeah, maybe not so much in him personally, but, you know, in his supporters base. You know, those so-called Yabatsky or the nomenclatura. You know, these guys.
Можно, да? А вы помечайте, записывайте, я какие-то тезисы скажу важные. Ну вот почему для людей, которые живут на этой местности, которая сейчас называется суверенная Беларусь, ну, пока, для этих людей характерно стремление к стабильности. Потому что раньше тут было что? Болото. Люди на болоте. Вот так и жили. А какую на болоте поднимешь волну? Ну, в лучшем случае никакую. Поэтому для этих людей на болоте и характерная приверженность, знаете, к устойчивости и усидчивости. А что касается меня, да? Почему я поддерживаю вышесидящее руководство? Ну, это же разговор никуда не пойдет, да? Хорошо. Ну, если честно, своя рубашка, знаете, ближе к телу. Ну, в моем случае еще и пиджак. Поэтому держусь, знаете, держусь за свое насиженное место. Пусть золотых яиц уже и не высидишь с этим лидером, но, значит, на простых, человеческих, понимаете, держусь. Держусь за вертикаль. Есть такая хорошая народная мудрость, запишите, запомните себе. Каждый сверчок знает свой шесток. Вот мы знаем свой шесток. Наш шесток – это вертикаль президентская, да? И мы на этом шестке все и крутимся. Yeah.
Well, I guess it makes sense that only a few people are enthusiastic supporters of the regime, while others find reasons to stay in the system for the time being.
As I was saying, I mean, this is why it makes so much sense to sometimes also, switch perspectives and try to look at things even through the eyes of the regime itself. How do they see the world? What is it that they want? What is it that they need?
But wait, you said you fight with the Rebel Alliance, and who they are? Is this exiled opposition? Are they still around? I mean, aren't they all marginalized and basically incapable of anything?
I mean, yes, of course, they are all extremists and terrorists, narkomane, prostitutki. But I don't think they're all idiots.
You believe in them?
Ironically, not just me. It seems like the ones who believe the most strongly in the capabilities of the democratic forces are the regime people themselves.
How do you mean?
When they organized the so-called parliamentary elections, which was, of course, another big bogus, in spring 2024, they activated the whole security apparatus because they were so afraid of new protests. Even the Air Force was on alert.
That's insane. Do you think there is still some kind of a stalemate?
Well, the majority of people still want changes, but the regime is pretty much in charge. But do you know what's actually very stalemate? The air in here. Please open the window. And also, it's really hot. Aren't you going to offer me something to drink?
Well, but what would you like?
Something refreshing. Minced mule, maybe?
I'm afraid we don't have that.
Afraid. That's been a question I've always asked myself. Elephants fear the mouse, and the mice fear the snakes. Concubines fear the spouse, and diabetics fear cakes. We know the snowman fears spring, and that kids fear the ghost under their bed. But what's the thing that dictators fear most? Well, the answer may sound just like a bad April Fool. The truth is they most fear the people that they're trying to rule. Their fake election propaganda serves the grand leitmotif. The people love them, but the people really want them to live. Of course, in Belarus, none of the above applies. The president is popular, benevolent and wise. He only saved his fatherland from a CIA plot they set up with an unpatriotic protesters' lot. In 2020, they conspired up against the state. So-called peaceful marches were the blunt incitement of hate. These extremists with their Nazi symbols, white, red, white. Just since when has waving flowers been a human right? Vaccinated Satanists who clearly don't pay taxes. Let those leeches dance around until the state collapses. And the new number one shall run the things at the top. A president who has no experience on the job. Violations of the public order, see them roam. And to confuse us in the evening, they all go home. There is no doubt that these adventurers in self-defense had to be locked up somewhere safe behind wire and fence. And of course, when your stability is put to a test, you look around to learn from the best of the best. You thought a North Korean look-alike in Europe? Here, there's no way. Lukashenko be like, hold my beer.
So today there are more labor camps all over the land than theaters, dictatorships and irresistible brand. Why care when prisoners sometimes might die or disappear? There are too many of them anyways, that's crystal clear. Don't trust the Western propaganda. The UN agree Minsk might be to blame for crimes against humanity. Why did those so-called human rights defenders not take action when I was ridiculed on Facebook in that comment section? So, you traitors ran away. You think you will get off? We know exactly where your grandma lives in Mogilov. You better hide and run will come for every one of you.
Wake up, man. This has gone too far.
What's going on?
You passed out, and then, what the hell? You had some kind of a nightmare.
A nightmare? Well, you know that happens sometimes. But at least my nightmares only come in my sleep. And, well, many people in Belarus are living the nightmare all the time.
And that affects you?
Well, technically it's called
repression compassion.
See, I totally get it, that to an outsider it might seem random, maybe even a bit irrational to care a lot about this topic at all. I mean, there are so many horrible things happening in the world that might seem to be objectively worse than human rights in Belarus. There's war, poverty, famine, the climate crisis, the pandemic of mandatory cookie preference management pop-ups. And yet, I care about this.
What is exactly that you care about?
Look.
The human rights crisis in Belarus is deepening, with the situation deteriorating every month. The situation has always been difficult, and there have been no systematic changes. However, over the past 4 years, we have faced a real catastrophe. 65,000 people detained, 3,485 political prisoners, of which 1,358 are currently in prison. Almost 7,000 people are defendants in political criminal cases. 6 political prisoners have died in prison. 5 people died during protests and detentions. 0 criminal cases have been opened regarding the torture and death of protesters and political prisoners. 6 human rights defenders are currently in prison, including 5 of my colleagues from Vyazma. Among them is Nobel Peace Prize laureate Ales Bialiatski.
Oh, there were a lot of numbers.
But behind every single digit, there is a human fate, like a person who's suffering right now, and also family that's being torn apart. Can you imagine what it's like to be a prisoner in one of Lukashenko's camps?
Tell me.
I'd rather leave that one to someone who's actually been there and lived through all of this.
За кратамі стрэс і пастаянна агрэсіўнае асяроддзе павольна адымаюць здароўе ў кожнага. Асабліва гэта тычыцца палітычных, якіх там жа ў першы дзень нашываюць бірку жоўтага колеру, каб стварыць нечалавечыя ўмовы, якія пераходзяць нават у катаванні. Асабліва бесчалавечнае стаўленне адбываецца ў штрафных ізалятарах, дзе палітычных катуюць холадам, адбіраюць споднюю тэрмабілізну, не даюць матрасы, пастельную білізну, дзе дрэннае харчаванне, недахоп вітамінаў і шпацыраў, дзе палітычных месяцамі, нават гадамі трымаюць у адзіночных камерах без сувязі са знешнім светам, дзе поўная адсутнасць медыцынскай дыягностыкі здароўя, дзе няма сувязі са знешнім светам. Ну, а ў перапынках паміж ізалятарамі палітычных сілком адпраўляюць на брудную і шкодную працу ў халодныя прамысловыя цэхі, не выдаючы пры гэтым індывідуальных сродкаў абароны. Улічваючы вялікую працягласць гэтых выпрабаванняў, нешматлікія змогуць выжыць у такіх умовах без шкоды для свайго здароўя. І самае галоўнае выпрабаванне – гэта адбываць прызначаныя тэрміны без віны, бо амаль усе палітычныя вымушаны сядзець без злачынстваў.
Oh, I had no idea. And it's all very touching. And it does explain why people do not protest against regime anymore. Is there any way to help them?
Well, there's a lot of things that can be done in terms of raising awareness, keeping the topic on the agenda. also in terms of supporting the families of political prisoners. You know, there's a lot of initiatives, actually, organizations or initiative groups that do this kind of fundraising, that do social media campaigns, that organize political godparentships for international parliamentarians, for political prisoners. And a lot of people are actually doing a great job here. But at the end of the day, it's the regime that holds the keys to the dungeons. And if they decide to, they can have the people rot in there basically forever.
I get why you feel sorry for them.
I don't think the point is to be sorry. First of all, in the European Union, we don't say that we are sorry, but the term is that we are very concerned. You know, we are the world champions of very concernedness on Twitter and on Instagram. No, but seriously. I really don't feel sorry for them. For me, these people are heroes. I would rather say that I admire them. You know, most of them really took the decision very consciously to stand up for human rights, for democracy, for rule of law, for freedom in their country. And they knew what the price for their bravery could be. These values that these people defend in the prison cells and on the streets, those are my values. Those are our European values.
European values. Do you think most people in the West even realize that Belarus is the part of Europe?
Well, maybe not, but you know, most people also think that pumpkins are vegetables, when botanically speaking, they're actually fruits. But that doesn't mean that pumpkins need to care what most people think of them. They don't give a shit whether you think they're just some kind of insanely inflated doomsday mutant sweet potatoes. They're still going to be fruits. And they're going to come for all you fruity Philistines on Halloween at veggie witching hours. And the same way, why would Belarus care whether people think it's Northern Antarctica or Western Africa or Southeast Asia? It's still going to be Europe. And not just some part of Europe, but
in the very heart of it. In fact, 5 different geographic methods locate center of the continent right in Belarus, or very close to it. This unique position shows the importance of Belarus inside the whole continent. And also, Belarus is the biggest European landlocked country with equally long borders shared with European Union, Ukraine, and Russia. So our country is literally surrounded by Europe. And for us, Belarusians, there is no issue if we are Europeans. We definitely are, and not only geographically.
But Europe is about more than just geography.
But so is Belarus.
You believe?
You believe. Well, you see, Belarus was already more European in the modern normative sense of the word than many Western European countries since the early modern ages.
How do you mean?
Well, Belarus was then, at the time, part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the biggest country in Europe at that time.
Which time?
About 15th, 16th century. So at the time when in Western Europe we would burn witches and slaughter each other with torches and pitchforks on behalf of our God-sent princes. And that's when these guys here came up with the so-called statutes of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The first full code of laws in Europe since the Roman fucking Empire. It was written in Old Belarusian, and it introduced a system of governance that was based on the rule of law, which limited even the power of His Majesty the King.
Wow, that's avant-garde.
Man, that was freaking groundbreaking. And you know, they even went on and formed this Commonwealth together with Poland. Historians say it was the first predecessor of today's European Union, because it was 2 sovereign countries that came together and created joint political institutions. Again, see, we're in the 16th century here. And imagine, they even had a type of proto-democracy. The nobility elected their kings from all over Europe, France, Sweden, Poland, Hungary, even Germany. And eventually, they had the first modern constitution of Europe.
I thought that was France.
Non, monsieur, désolé de vous décevoir. The French came only 4 months later.
No kidding? I had no idea.
Same here. See, for me, discovering all of these things about a country that everyone just called the white spot on the European map, that was like freaking discovering Atlantis.
But Atlantis is sunk. That was centuries ago. And then Belarus became part of the Russian Empire.
Which they resisted in several uprisings.
And then the Soviet Union.
Which was dissolved in Belarus in 1991. And by the way, Belarus was still a founding member of the United Nations in 1945.
Okay, I get it. You are a great Belarus expert.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm so much of an expert on Belarus. I'm just an expat working with Belarus, an expat with some crazy symptoms.
Okay, whatever, but why do you tell me all of this?
You tell me. It's like I just can't help it. I have this urge to just tell everyone about Belarus all the time.
Well, I would say the diagnosis is pretty clear. You're infected with Belaruskost at a terminal stage.
Hell yeah! This is it! You're totally right.
And you also seem to be some kind of a dangerous super spreader.
You bet.
And you want to be healed, right?
Not at all. I want to infect everyone.
An ambulance passes by and you go white, red, white. You love to jump over the fire in Kupala night. Your pets are 3 turtles, you got no idea why you order Draniki at every pizzeria. Your Cyrillic alphabet contains a smile on the hue. Where other people see a white spot, you see colors and hue. You don't have to see an eye doctor about that itch. Your incurable condition, Belaruska's bitch. 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 You see a cherry on a cream pie and no Belarus cake. You wanna dance with the bison till the metals quake. You're into foam candy with a chocolate coat. You like when protests rocket this elected president's boat. You're a tank commander in the cyber battle range. You feel where people think that Europe ends in Poland is strange. You're a Klino Alexievich, Filip fan. That's an excellent taste. That's Belaruska's man. 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 You see tomato, mozzarella, and LBGB. You think that Tesla's cute, but grown-ups drive an MTZ. Someone speaking Russian can be pro-democracy, but that doesn't mean that they are Russian, no siree. Your potato chips come in the shape of stripes of tape. Your wardrobe's white tie outfit with Shivanka cape. Your electronic cigarettes steam out Machanka vape. That's no flavor for me, that's Belaruska's babe. 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 And in your dreams, all sorrows take a lot. The world becomes a painting by Chagall. You mount a Dranicopter and you fly around Magica. Be wise. Belaruska's bitch. 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 Belaruska's bitch.
Geez, I think I'm starting to feel it too now.
Clover!
Well, maybe it's time then.
Time for what?
To book my trip to Belarus and check it out for myself.
Well, that's a great idea in principle, and nothing is as great and powerful as a strong idea when its time has come.
But that isn't now?
No, I'm afraid we're still in the time of political hostage-taking.
Yeah, I saw it on the news. That Schreibman guy talked plenty about it.
As probably the whole community and mafia of so-called Belarus experts. So, but again, I'm afraid your trip is going to have to wait.
Wait for what?
The WOO.
Double O? Is James Bond gonna bust me out of prison?
No, I mean the WOO, the window of opportunity.
What opportunity exactly?
Opportunity for Belarus to become free and democratic again. I'm very sure that moment is going to come and that the world has to be prepared for that.
Well, that sounds like a very distant utopia.
I know.
utopia.
Yeah, it might feel like a utopia, but so was the fall of the Berlin Wall. It just seemed impossible until it just happened. And the same can happen to Belarus.
Well, the times were very different then.
Yeah, but you know, some things never change. People want freedom, they want security, they want justice.
Well, who wouldn't?
You know, the thing for Belarus is, I would say, the question, do the people there see a clear, attractive, convincing alternative to the system they have to live in right now? An alternative they can actually believe in, that gives them hope.
Well, do they?
Ну а что? А что? А что? А какие альтернативы? Альтернатив нет. Вызывайте машину. Где мой охранник?
See, it was all there in 2020. People could see it and feel it, and it was real because it was in their country. And they haven't forgotten that. But I would say today it's basically on us, the Western community, the free world, to keep up the hopes for this alternative for them, like we did in the Cold War for the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. If we believe in this to be a real option, today's utopia can be reality tomorrow.
But it is not like everything is perfect in the West.
Yeah, of course not. But you know, at least if you don't like the leadership in the Western communities and democratic countries, you have a choice to change them every 4 to 5 years.
But sometimes choice on the ballot is between bad and the worst.
Yes, of course, but it's still better than having no choice at all. And if you don't like what's on the menu, you always have the option to go into politics yourself. And you're not going to be locked up in a stinky prison cell for 10 years if the government doesn't like you.
So what is our message to Belarusians then?
That we care about them, and that we see them for what they are, our European neighbors, and that they are welcome to us, even to become a member of the European Union one day, if they choose to.
What makes you so sure they would even want that?
Well, countless conversations with Belarusians on the one hand, but also scientific data.
In 2020, the geopolitical orientations in Belarus were in favor of Europe, not Russia. And people really believe in this option. Today, pro-European orientations in Belarus reduced dramatically. These visa restrictions, etc., this touched just regular people. And at the same time, business with regime still continue.
Right, but again, why would we want to make people feel welcome when the government supports war in Ukraine and threatens us?
Because it's not the government of the people anymore. Remember, it was the people of Belarus who tried to vote and then protest that regime away in 2020. And we also know that a strong majority of them is opposed against their country's involvement in the war.
Well, how strong is that majority?
Almost 90%.
Not bad, but it's not like they resisted actively.
Well, see, at home they just can't because of all the repressions. But if you look at what's going on in Ukraine, Belarusians are actually the second biggest group of volunteer fighters, and they suffer the third highest number of casualties.
Wow.
Take a look at this. Today, this is basically the front line of freedom. It's pretty obvious that without Belarus, free Europe is incomplete, starting from things like heart security.
Well, I remember Russia attacked Ukraine through Belarus.
See? Things like Bucha that happened right here, and all the other provocations, like the Wagner Group or stationing of nuclear forces.
Right, and weaponizing of migration.
There you go, see? So if Belarus is free and safe, so will be the whole region. It's key. My point is, see, you probably know how the Russians like to tell the story of the triune East Slavic brothers who were actually one and the same.
Lenin, Stalin, and Putin?
No, Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. The point is, if two of these so-called brothers were actually to become democratic and free, the Kremlin propaganda would have a problem.
Well, as if they care about facts or inconsistencies.
Well, you have a point. But what I'm trying to say is that supporting free and democratic Belarus is not just the right thing to do, but it's actually an investment. And not just in our joint security and freedom, but even in our joint prosperity.
How do you mean?
I think we need to think long-term, how to develop the region and the continent as a whole. There are so many locked potentials in Eastern Europe.
And there's a war going on.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, when Ukraine wins that war, the actual work is only just going to start.
Yeah, reconstruction will take forever.
Yeah, but I mean, not just reconstruction. I think we need to lay the groundwork totally anew for a new prosperity and perspective for the whole region, from the Baltics to the Black Sea.
So you want to turn the old bloodlands into some kind of new blue banana?
I would rather speak of a new Silicon Valley in Eastern Europe.
Oh, come on. Now you're being ridiculous.
Well, not at all. I mean, on the one hand, sure, they have all the traditional industries with which they can contribute, like a strong food industry, machine building, engineering. Generally, they have a qualified workforce, high labor ethics. But what I think is most promising, that they still have all the innovative potential, like a huge startup scene.
But you said about Silicon Valley. Is it about IT?
Exactly.
In the years before 2020, the IT industry of Belarus has become a true rising star. So there are many skilled developers and engineers of Belarus are world-class at working with modern technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, and machine learning. They are known for great problem solving and being very creative, which is why companies all over the world want to work with them. Of course, the repressions were a big blow to all this. But the great potential is still there. And there is no question that in a democratic future, this sector would be one of the main driving forces for the Belarusian economy.
Okay, wow, I surrender. You got me infected. How come nobody knows about all that?
Well, that is a good question. But the more important question is, how are we going to spread the news, and are you going to help me?
Well, sure, my friend. But before that, I also have one relevant question. Are you finally going to order something?
Draniki z miasem.
But this is a French wine bar.
3 glasses of wine, then.
White, red?
White, red, and white.
Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. You hear Europe and think about the Champs-Élysées. Ancient Greece, the Romans saw the Mona Lisa portray. Babel Castle, the flamenco, or the old town of Prague. Lego Vikings or about Black Forest National Park. All of what you see is show part of the continent's brand. It's a view that counts maybe up to 50%. Often overlooked, but right there at the nucleus. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Belarus. Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. Freedom and the values that we hold dear. Belarus has become some kind of a final frontier. For although a cruel dictator is suppressing their voice, we all know the Belarusians made a different choice. And that neo-Tsarist Kremlin seems to believe he can gobble neighbor countries for an aperitif. Let us spoil his appetite and let him choke on the snack. Europe's missing link, free Belarus will be back. Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. Let the world here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Right on. Belarus, 'cause virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. Come on, Pavel. Here help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus virus we infuse. Europe's missing link, Belarus. From Brasilia to Syracuse, from the grizzlies to the kangaroos, Hindus, Muslims, Catholics and Jews, everyone will love Belarus. Let the world hear, help us spread the news. Make them la 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 love Belarus. Belarus, cause virus we infuse. You will la 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 love Belarus. On my list there's not many to do. Just infect all the world with Belarus. Carve it in like colorful tattoos. Robust. Your new favorite country, Belarus. Let the world hear, help us spread